and to that hope, that fear, the pioneer spirit of humanity, to see that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Real quick before addressing that,
Sure.
I think one of the reasons that, and it's an interesting reason why so many, particularly sci-fi writers, write down humans. They downplay humans. They are ashamed of humans as a human race. I think one, it's a self-loathing thing, but also there is evil in the world. Humans do a lot of bad things. There's truth in that, but there's a difference between acknowledging. See, I think in acknowledging the evil in the world, people don't realize there's an alternative. That
Amen.
God wants to give us better. We hold ourselves down. Whether we hold ourselves down by not fully believing and trusting in God, or by not, it just depends. But there is an alternative. But if you don't have hope, and you just look at what so many people do and how people will mess over each other, oh my gosh, they will definitely mess you over in the entertainment industry. It doesn't matter what branch it is. But if you've got hope, if you have the Lord, then you can navigate those waters.
Amen.
You can have hope in this world. But if you don't, of course you're going to look at people as, bad and evil, and why are we even still here? The animals deserve to be here more than we do. The trees deserve to be here more than... No, you deserve to be here. There is hope. Here's how.
Amen. Thank you so much, Alan, just putting that PSA in there, because we kind of need it. Because I was talking to, that's why I don't watch the news, because it's so depressing. It will drain you. Like, you watch the news and you're like, we are just no hope, and that's why people are looking. Honestly, to our whole space exploration thing.
Yeah.
They're looking to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos to take us away.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, they can't do much, because God forbid if these people die tomorrow, Jesus will still be here. Amen.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
And so it's like, but the space exploration is exciting though, because we are probing the universe, learning more things, finding out that what we knew, we kind of were glad that we have some things proven, and then some things that we don't know.
Here's what I love. Yesterday I watched, I've been watching a lot of space documentary videos, just these little 10-minute things here and there. But I saw one yesterday that was the history of taking pictures of the Earth from the air and then from space, going all the way back to the early 1900s. And some men went up in a hot air balloon as high as they could go, like tens of thousands of feet in the air. I don't know how they were breathing, but but they went up there and they took these pictures, and it proved for the first time that there was an angle, round angle to the Earth. If you go up high enough, the way that, like, say, mountains, it was in New Mexico, the mountains in the distance, the way that they curved, you wouldn't be able to see it except from that kind of altitude. And so it gave the first kind of definitive proof that the Earth was not flat. And then they did things in airplanes, and then by the 50s they had gotten to rockets, and by the 60s they had the first cosmonauts in space, and they took progressively better pictures, and it went from grainy black and white to grainy color to finally to the point of getting video in by the 1970s and the 1980s, and now they can do HD from probes from the other side of the moon, looking back at Earth, and you get this perspective. And then you look at what they're learning about these planets and exoplanets and the different galaxies, and learning. I think that's great. I think it's wonderful to learn how the universe works, because we learn things like the fact that the moon is actually moving slowly away from orbit by like a half inch every year. It's nothing in terms of space, but it's fascinating in terms of the fact that we see it as stationary, but the fact is it's actually moving away. And, but then we get into what we're talking about with, exploring. Everybody wants, so many people, Musk and others who think they can colonize Mars, and far be it for me to dissuade them, except to say, even Musk has said, for a lot of people, going there for the first time is going to be a one-way trip and probably a death sentence. Because it's not,
right.
it's not safe in space.
No.
Just for the fact that no matter what vehicle you're traveling in, there's radiation in space, period.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we only know what we know about our solar system because we've sent probes out, and satellites to pick up this kind of information. But, they talk about wanting to, colonize the moon Titan and all these types of things. These are great ideas in theory, and you can do a lot with it, and you can say, we can do this, and we can build this, and China wants to start building giant space stations and launch parts into space and this and that. That's great. But you have to look at the fact that we've got so much distance and time, and unlike Star Trek, we don't have sleeper ships yet.
No. They're coming, though.
They're coming.
But no, not yet.
And even if we did, just being realistic, the fact of the matter is that the further out you go, because we don't have self-sustainable, we don't have faster than light drive, we don't have ships that can withstand those kinds of speeds, we don't have the technology yet. Could we have the technology someday? Yes, absolutely, we could. But I think even in the planning stages, we have to be careful because we weren't designed for that. Even the people that go and spend 6 months or a year on the space station, they're affected by it. Yeah. They're affected by not being in gravity. They're affected by being in a radioactive environment. Mm-hmm. It's just that they put as much protection there as they can. But I think any astronaut would tell you that after being in space and coming back, you're changed.
Exactly.
And we've gotten good at it. Okay, we've sent a lot of people into space, and we've brought a lot of people back safely. And thank goodness there's only been a handful of catastrophic disasters in the last 50, 60 years. But it's not something to be undertaken lightly. And I think it is interesting. But I think we're going to gain a whole lot more information from automated probes. They've even proven that Voyager 1 and 2 can still function and do stuff after 40 years. That is amazing.
I think, too, with space exploration, what we're learning so much just from our little planet is amazing as well. I saw the documentary on Netflix called Alien Worlds, where they did this hypothetical, how would alien life have evolved under different scenarios. Fascinating documentary. But they also use real-world examples to kind of underpin their thoughts there. And the lady, she was an astrophysicist, and she said we could take a picture of the light from some distant object. I can't remember if it was a star or a planet. And we can measure that, filter it through, see the rainbow, you can see the elements in that atmosphere. And we're sitting down here in Detroit. You see what I'm saying? And so to me, that's nothing to sniff your nose like, we can only look at it from here. The fact that we can understand it shows you just how God created us for curiosity. Yes. He created us to probe. I'm not saying we have to go out wandering to a distant star. Like I said, I'm staying on Earth. Let's say they started because the Virgin Galactic's doing their what I'm trying to say, Alan.
Yeah.
They're going to the atmosphere. They're just going to the atmosphere. Not even going off. They're not going too far past Earth.
Well, and even they had to kind of put their particular the spaceship that Branson went up in. It's on hiatus because they had a red light during it, and so they have to, the FAA has to clear it before they can even go up again. So safety is always a concern.
Right. Exactly. And so. And something innocuous can happen. That's one of the things about space exploration when you're going to do it on a first-person basis when you do it, as opposed to probing from observatories here, which isn't bad either. I mean, I thought one of the greatest things that happened within recent times is when that machine landed on the asteroid, and it had taken 2 years, very complicated calculations to get there, and then it fell off. But It
Yeah.
came back. They got it back. So, which I'm sorry, I laughed so hard, and I should not have because that's a lot of work. Okay, but
Yeah.
it was funny to me, all that work, and it fell off. Okay, but then they said, you know what, we're still gonna keep pushing it, and that's the
Yeah.
human ingenuity that we forget to highlight in our
Absolutely.
sci-fi. The
Absolutely.
adaptability, the ability to say, okay, I couldn't get it this way. Let's see what we can do here.
Well, and that's the one thing that I think that they actually did right in Star Trek in particular. You know, I think back to one of the ways that they did that well was in the Enterprise series with Trip Tucker. I mean, he was always having things frustrate him, but he would also come up with these seemingly ridiculous, or just like he would talk to T'Pol for 5 minutes. Okay, we got an answer.
Right. And I never watched Enterprise because I'm a purist. So there is no ship past Kirk. So I never watched Enterprise. But I did sneak at one. They did a mirror universe. I sneaked at that one. That was a good one. And I sneaked at the arc with the Nazis.
Which was weird but good. But the thing is, you talk about things here on Earth, and science fiction. Part of science fiction is science, and one of the things that I think is fascinating is God has given us so much just in the human body, and people have different medical conditions and afflictions, but we're survivors as a species. And one of the things that I think is amazing is just the human immune system. There are so many things that could kill us, but the immune system protects us. Now, there are immunocompromised people, and I have great sympathy for them and prayers for them. And that's become really highlighted during the pandemic, because those are the majority of the people who have been severely affected by this. At the same time, I take comfort from the fact that the majority of people can survive even getting the virus with their own immunity. And I don't think that has been highlighted enough. I'm not saying anything against anything. I'm just saying I am pro-immune system. I think it's amazing, and I think that while there are wonderful technological advances and medical advances, and those are to be acknowledged, at the same time, I realize that God gave us all the tools we need when we were born. And I think that's amazing.
What's fascinating, too, when I was watching the documentary Babies on Netflix, they were I'm surprised. If it did not get an award, I'm so surprised, because it talked about how babies being in a sterile environment isn't good for a baby. We don't mean you don't throw them in filth, but
right.
being in a sterile environment would actually compromise their growing immune system.
Yep.
And the fact that we come here programmed with a defense system is amazing to me. And that was just in babies. They were talking about scientists who work with babies, not children, just babies, like from baby to 1 year old, 2 years old, something like that.
Right.
And so it's good that you mentioned that. I know you're not saying anything about whatever. You're just saying it's amazing that we're programmed with this defense system. But that brings us to our next point. We talk space exploration. And one of my favorite, if not the favorite part of this, is aliens and UFOs. Okay. And we're going to just say it. The U.S. government, the United States government recently released all these classified documents on UFOs, basically backtracking all their skepticism that people have seen these UFOs, as opposed to why is another subject for another time. But one of the best aspects, I think, of sci-fi is the creativity to create civilizations and worlds alien to our own.
Absolutely. I think that's I did that for the Jordan of Algorand series, and that was a lot of fun, because it's like, I think the only criticism, legit criticism that I got of the Makta and the aliens was that they were too human in their thinking, and it's like, okay, that's fine, but you don't want to make them so unrelatable that, like, I don't think I'd be able to convey as much with so-and-so screeched. and so understood them. This isn't the droids in Star Wars where humans understand droids for some reason.
I was thinking about the Arrival with the tentacle aliens.
That was a cool movie. That was a
I loved
cool movie.
It was strange because it didn't have all the hallmarks of sci-fi that I particularly like, except for the alien contact.
Yeah.
But it was more of an introspective, almost a thinking man's sci-fi.
Yes.
And the fact that you were, I'm sorry, we're spoiling things. She was getting future things instead of past.
Input.
Yeah. And the whole thing about time, the aliens' concept of time, all that. But go ahead. What were you saying about aliens?
It made you think. That's for sure. And now one thing I do like in regards to aliens is like, okay, I think you'll agree with me on this one. One of the best representations of aliens, another Star Trek first, in TNG, the Darmok episode.
Yes!
Where you had the Temerian.
His eyes open!
Yes! Where a species speaks in metaphors. The universal translator could translate their words, but then what if the words don't make sense to you because you don't have their knowledge of stories? That was brilliant, to basically, and even though we, the audience, didn't know what the Temerian was referring to, but you could tell by his tone, you could tell by his body language, and what the people in the reference were doing, you could get a clue what he was talking about. And so they got it to the point where Picard picks up on this and is able to get them out of the mess that they're in. But it's like, and I thought that was really brilliant writing, because it legitimately showed, it gave Starfleet something that they had never dealt with before, not successfully. And it's always good when you give, the good guys a problem they can't solve right offhand. And Riker was an absolute idiot in that episode, and I loved it.
Chaka when the walls fell. And you're sitting there going, what in the... I remember when I first saw the episode, I'm with the rest of them. What in the world are they talking about? It's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
But they show you the reason why it's incomprehensible is because you don't understand the stories. And stories are a universal language. Because once you understood the story, all of a sudden you knew the language. And that's what made it fascinating. And then it was so sad toward the end, what happened toward the end, because he finally understood they were going to make this big, push or whatever, and then tragedy,
Right.
His eyes wet.
And the fact that the Temerian captain deliberately put them into a metaphoric situation, that the fact that they would have to fight the creature, and that would make a story. That they could say they fought. His idea was like, they'll reach an understanding, they'll fight the creature together, and they will leave. And it didn't work out that way at all.
It was such a good idea. Great story,
Yes.
Great story. But that relates to language. And see, that's the other part of alien civilizations too. Language is the thought processes of the culture. That's what made that significant too. The only way Picard would even have to understand his language to understand they were talking in metaphor. And the only way was to create that story.
Yes.
And then that's the bridge. Because when he started talking to the Temerian captain, I got you. I totally understand.
Right.
And that's a fun thing about sci-fi too, with the alien culture too.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is that, like, it's always good to give aliens their own culture. That again, coming back to Jordan of Algorand, it was really important to me to give each of the different tribes on Algorand their own culture and their own, like, they would name things differently, or like the Makta would define the days by how many moons had passed, as opposed to we usually go off of the sun, And so if you give a different reference point, or you give what those aliens value, they may be different from what we value, but you can still understand and respect it.
And I thought the Makta, when you did that, I thought it came from In the Evening and the Morning was the first day. Like you pulled it from that general understanding of how time, in the biblical sense, came. I just thought that's something I thought about when I was reading.
That's interesting. No, I was literally flipping it because we think in terms of it's been this many days. Say it's been 4 days or 30 days from now, or but I put it in terms of like we'll be there in three moon turns. It's the same thing. It's just using the moon as a reference instead of the sun.
Yeah, and those little nuances really add depth to a sci-fi story, a sci-fi movie. But one of the things people don't like is when, even if it's human, let's say if it's a human culture, like from a parallel universe or multi-universe, you still want to have something alien about it.
Yeah.
You still want that because that's the fun part, something that's completely different from me.
Although the only thing I don't like is when the aliens always have to be the bad guy. It's okay in some circumstances. Sometimes they would be, but I mean, it seemed like there was just a slew of movies. The only one I can think that wasn't like that goes back to the 80s. Enemy Mine had one where it seemed like they were the bad guy, but they found an understanding, And so it was just the fact that they didn't understand each other was the problem. Again, kind of that Darmok situation. And so that helped to solve the crisis. But yeah, you got to have something that shows the difference. But I also like in sci-fi when the environment is the challenge.
Yeah.
Like how many times did either the Enterprise from Kirk's time or from other series, they would get stuck by something and they had to figure out how to get unstuck from whether it was an anomaly, a nebula, whatever the situation was, and the clever ways. Now, realistically, probably if it wasn't a TV show or a movie, 9 times out of 10, whoever was in that ship would die. But
we're all goners.
But it's interesting. I also think it's another thing that's interesting about space exploration sci-fi is that there's a lot of naval analogies, like the Navy. So you'll have the captain goes down with the ship, or you still hold some type of militaristic protocol, even if it's not Star Trek. I've seen a lot of sci-fi things with those set up. Even in Alien and Aliens, they still had a militaristic aspect to it, because you would think out there you're in unknown territory, you would need rules, you would need some type of structure. And so in that regard, a military structure makes sense to me, although it might also cause its own problems.
Actually, I was thinking about even in The Martian, which is hard sci-fi, and that's probably one of the best hard sci-fi stories I've ever seen. I didn't read the book, but I've ever seen. And he's on Mars by himself, and he was very extremely practical, what's really realistic. And it was almost a horror story for me because God knows I would hate to be left on Mars by myself, and I could not have survived. I already know. I'd be like, Jesus, you gotta transport me to Earth. I know you can't, you know what I mean? But and I liked The Martian. It was actually a very good movie. When you were going back to something you said about the aliens always being the enemy, I was actually thinking about the day the Earth stood still, and from the 1950s, and how he came to help out. Like, I'm here to help, and we're all very suspicious because that again is another downside to humanity, is that we do tend to fear what we don't understand. Yes. And sci-fi really explores that in some really interesting ways. These aspects of the alien trope, alien civilizations, but the downside that I don't like is when they make the aliens necessary for our civilization, like the alien gods. I mean, it's interesting, yes. Even like Q in Star Trek. I know for our listeners, they're like, really? You guys are like Star Trek nuts. We did warn you before that. Okay.
It's even on my website. I mean, hey,
it's in my bio too. Like, Star Trek lovers, hate to break it to you, but even like with Q, like Q being the omnipotent alien being, he does that a lot.
Q though was very interesting in that I do feel like Q was an evolution of the Trelane character in the original series.
Me too.
bottom line with Q, though, what made Q interesting was that for all of his pomp and for all of his power, he still lacked understanding, and that is what made him interesting, is that he was curious. He thought he knew everything, but he knew he didn't, because why ask questions? Why try and learn from Picard and others? Even Janeway.
Why'd you say it like that? Even Janeway.
Because that is one of the weirdest episodes of Voyager that there is, because he's trying to woo Janeway, and it's just bizarre. There was something lovable about the character, because he very rarely, when Q played it serious, it was kind of scary. But most of the time he didn't. Most of the time he either played for laughs, or they made Q vulnerable, and that took away that made him immersive, I guess I should say, as opposed to just there's so many alien cold characters. I mean, even the Borg Queen is just almost unapproachable, as a character. But Q kind of brought you in because of his personality, and that made him interesting as an alien, because he could make himself. He also had the perfect excuse to look human, because he could make himself look like whatever he wanted. He could look like a rock if he wanted to,
I liked him too, because he was always fascinated with humanity. Humanity
Yes.
fascinated him, and as a person, as a being rather, who's supposed to have all this knowledge, the fact that this race could do that's what made it interesting. And then that goes back to what we were saying about how sci-fi, Star Trek hit it right with the complexity of human nature.
Yes.
And that's something that I think the culture is forgetting in some instances, is that humanity is very complex, and God understands it better than we do. We don't even get it. That's why we're so depressed when we see all this one aspect of human nature being touted every single day, every meeting. It depresses you. But then you hear something like, oh, this kid saved a dog from getting beat by whatever.
Right.
And we run to that, because we're like, we can't all be this bad,
Right.
We can't all be that way.
Or like, even I think of all things, a dash cam video of a policeman who was arresting an African American, but he started choking, and the guy who he was about to arrest performed the Heimlich on him, saved his life. And it's like just those things where it's like, when it comes down to a life at stake, there is no race. There is no any of that. Yes, physically, yes, DNA, but it's about saving your fellow human. Not everybody is inclined towards that, but it's in there. It's in our makeup, that we can come together for each other, and we're losing that.
Yeah, and I think, and it saddens me, because one thing about fiction always explored the complexities of human nature, and knowing that you can have a flawed character, even though they're a good guy, they make bad decisions.
Good sci-fi makes you take a look at humanity and say, how can we improve? As opposed to the nihilistic view, which says, we can't improve, we stink, we should die.
It's so interesting. God says, when he's going to take care of it all, he's taking care of it. And he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. See, we see this world, this broken world, as broken eggs. We can't do anything with it. It's just going to stay broken. But God says, that's why you depend on me, because I got this. I know the final story, and I know it's going to happen. He gave us a taste of it. And that brings us to our last section of our discussion. I hope you guys have enjoyed, like me and Alan have. I can definitely tell you that we could go 4 hours on this, but I don't want to kill him, and Angel will kill me for stealing her husband for so long. So our last part of our conversation has to deal with the viewpoint of speculative fiction in the Christian world as opposed to the secular world.
A lot of people think that when they hear speculative, they think just straight sci-fi or hard sci-fi, not science fantasy. Now, within there is sci-fi with Christian fiction. There is science fantasy. I mean, you could even go back to C.S. Lewis in the 50s, who did some of the first, if not the first, Christian science fiction, science fantasy. But I tend to not use the term speculative. A lot of people in the Christian fiction publishing world do use speculative. I tend to just go straight for it's science fiction, or it's Christian science fiction, or it's Christian science fantasy, or Christian steampunk. It just makes it, I think, easier for the layman to know what we're talking about. Because when you talk about regular, basically secular, speculative sci-fi, that is a lot of what we've been talking about already. That's the the aliens, or the because you get into Star Wars, that's science fantasy. You get into Star Trek, that's more science fiction. Mm-hmm. Battlestar Galactica, definitely science fiction.
Right.
So it's, but see, to me the beauty of Christian science fiction, or Christian science fantasy, or Christian steampunk is it's got the same storytelling potential, but you're changing the lens a little bit. You're not going to have certain things that secular fiction has. You're not going to have the cursing, or at least you shouldn't. And you're not going to have the overt sex that you see in a lot of these. And I get it. People are trying to sell books to a secular audience. That stuff sells, okay? It's true. But it distracts to me. I just got done, I've read some regular science fiction, and of course I told you I already read the Star Trek books. Star Trek books don't have as much cursing, but they have cursing. So, with Christian science fiction, you can tell those same complex stories. You can develop those aliens. You can develop those. You can do that exploration, develop whole worlds, whole universes if you want to. But the focus is going to have some type of Christian theme. It's going to point you towards Jesus. It's going to point you towards God. And people have different ways of doing it. Different authors have different styles. But I think it's beautiful, because if you think about it, science fiction is about the universe. Who created the universe? God.
Amen.
Okay. And
Amen.
you know who was there helping to create the universe? Jesus.
Amen.
Because nothing was made except by him.
If I can do a slight, again, I'm going to plug in my one book no one's picked up, called House of Hadaway, book one of the fairy tale retelling series. I'm going to plug that in there. Then we're going to plug in another book, too. In my book, even though I wouldn't say it's overtly Christian, there are elements of my theology in there. Like everybody, there's a scene where this one alien race immigrates to Earth, and they're looking for marriage contracts. Okay, they're looking to get married. Okay, they're not looking for short-term flings, nothing. They're looking to get married. And then the deity I use is the engineer, because in my book, and don't laugh, Alan, but in my book, I have space trains, not spaceships.
Okay.
And they travel on dark matter railways that emanate all over the universe. So the Earth has been able to grid out. That's how they can own 1/3 of the galaxy. They gridded out the pathways of these dark matter railways. And yes, I know it's far-fetched. I don't care.
Actually, you know what? Star Trek was originally, Gene Roddenberry called Star Trek Wagon Train to the Stars.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
I feel better now. Okay. If Gene Roddenberry thought that, then darn it, I'm in good company. So, one book. So for those of you, if I get that fifth person to get that book, I'll really appreciate that fifth review there. But yeah, but my book, even though it's not overtly Christian, because I didn't want to make it like a Christian fantasy or space opera, but those elements are in there. The sanctity of marriage is in there, the sanctity of life, and mind you, it's all subtle. It's nothing over at all. And I like how you say it's going to have that. So going to your view about Christian sci-fi, what has Ambassador done to kind of fill in and plug in that void there?
Well, one thing that they've done, of course, they've allowed books like my Jordan Valgren series to be printed, which is amazing and wonderful, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. But they've also released their first sci-fi anthology, and I was fortunate enough to have a short story that I put into that called The Fate of Transport A14, but there was also 6 other authors, and they contributed amazing stories to it as well. It's over 200 pages. With these 7 different stories. It's called Into the Unknown, 7 short stories of faith and bravery. And like I say, it's the first sci-fi anthology. And the thing that was amazing about this was the brainchild of Daphne Self. She basically created a universe for us to play in. And so these are different stories taking part in different, areas within this shared universe. But we used the same technology. We used the same naming conventions for the ships. We used, some people did there's priests, there's a theology, and it is Christian, because this is basically an offshoot of humanity that has traveled out to the stars. So you can still keep, Christ and God part of this, and even the Bible and some of the stories are in there, because this is an extension of humanity in a sci-fi storytelling environment. They're on ships, they're going to other worlds, they're seeing other cultures, they're doing that exploration, and they're dealing with the unknown. Like my story, The Fate of Transport 8014, it's just a transport. It's not a big starship. It's not, fighting off with aliens, but it's an environment situation, because the transport passes by an uncharted nebula, and it causes the engines to stall out, and the ship is very near an asteroid field. So this is bad. And so without giving too much away, you've got basically the least likely person to take command of the ship has to take command of the ship, and that is the cook. It'd be like if in Voyager, Neelix had to take command of Voyager.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But this lady's name is Karen Leviana,
Mm-hmm.
and but see, she has her own interesting story in this. She used to be an XO, a commanding officer, second in command of a battle cruiser, but there was a reason that she left that life, and she's become a Christian. And so there's an ethical aspect to it. She may be the only person who can save the ship and its surviving crew, but can she make those life or death decisions as a pacifist Christian? And so there's the ethical dilemma, but there's a whole set of science fiction variables to deal with. Plus, there's the military structure of the crew. Are they going to accept her? Are they going to follow her orders? Does she have what it takes anymore to do this? So, and that's just one of the stories. The others are equally good, within this. So I was real proud, and I am real proud to be a part of Into the Unknown. And, I really hope this leads to more anthologies and more sci-fi anthologies, because it's really exciting. It's really wonderful to work with my fellow authors and see where they went with their stories. And, it did what an anthology is supposed to do, which is to take a subject matter and explore it from different authors' points of view, and give you hopefully a complete picture of what this universe is like. And they're all self-contained stories, so, the answers are already there. You're going to find out how everything ends, but it'll give you a taste of what Christian science fiction is.
And I was invited to give an endorsement of this book, and it was funny because I had, and I'm so sorry, I don't do it on purpose, but I was so busy, and so Alan's like, are you gonna sit it up there, So I had to hurry and read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed every single story. It was just like, I'm sorry. He was like, hurry up and send it. By the time I said, I was probably like two stories from done. But when I sent it, but when I read the two, I was like, okay, my endorsement completely stands. And I was again thankful to Ambassador International for allowing me to give my 2 cents about the anthology, because I'm all for Christians and sci-fi. I think we should be the runners of this genre, particularly more than anybody. I think we should be it too. So we have had a fun time talking, Alan. I know it was probably a long interview, but we have fun, and we always do when we talk, and especially this stuff here. And you can tell me and Alan,
We don't know how to shut up.
We don't. We really don't. But he has a life, and I have one too. So I have to let him go and enjoy his rest of his life, and everything. But Alan, thank you so much for just having us a very casual conversation about our opinion of the state of sci-fi in both the secular and in the Christian realm. Even though we focus a lot on the secular because we're really familiar with it. But hopefully, this will give our Christian viewers and listeners, our Christian listeners, an opportunity to maybe they want to take up the banner and say, hey, we need to do more of this and take hold of that. I encourage you to do that. And so for those of you listening, thank you for joining Alan and myself for this wonderful conversation, and have a wonderful, blessed day, and God bless.